Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is a story of what if Naruto and Sasuke was like Hashirama and Madara. Naruto and Sasuke will be strong. Naruto will have a wood release and he is a Senju. Sasuke will, as you all know, an Uchiha. Now let's start the story. Chapter 15. By the way, thanks for all the reviews, guys. It really does make me happy to read them. There's no greater joy for me than to read your opinions on my work. So, without further ado, here's the new chapter. Ninth Platoon, consisting of Yamashiro Aoba, Akamichi Choji, Yamanaka Ino, and leader Namiyashi Raida, didn't have too much trouble trying to locate the 5th platoon, given that a massive forest had shot into the sky rather suddenly, visible for miles. So, they weren't exactly hard to find. After all, for the last 5 minutes, the forest had been rocked by what could only be described as earthquakes and tidal waves. They were surprised, however, when they reached the team at the outskirts of the massive forest, only to see that they were missing a member. Kakashi-sensei. Choji said as the 9th platoon landed in front of Team 7 and a dead Akatsuki member. Where's Naruto? He's fighting this Frake's partner, Sasuke said, nudging the Akatsuki member with his foot. He needed some space to. Sasuke cut himself off when the ground shook something fierce, and he looked toward Naruto's location to see a large cloud of dust rising in the distance. The enemy is strong, Kakashi picked up for Sasuke. In order for Naruto to use some of his more destructive jutsu, he needed some space. What, we're not going to help him? Ino asked in surprise. Things could be going badly for him. If things go south, Naruto will come to us, Sasuke said simply. From the sound of it, he had complete confidence in Naruto's abilities. Hey, the dead Akatsuki member barked suddenly, making the members of 9th platoon jump in surprise. Don't underestimate Kakuzu. He'll beat the crap out of that blonde brat, then he'll come here and waste you all. He's not dead. Raida asked in amazement. His neck is clearly broken. Yeah, this guy is a bit hard to kill, it seems, Kakashi said with a nod. And, Kakashi was the one who was cut off this time. A massive explosion was heard in the distance, another massive cloud of dust rising from the trees. And his partner is pretty tough as well. Despite his body consisting of nothing but those strange tendrils, Kakuzu seemed to have the same weak points as any other human being, judging by his grunts of pain whenever Naruto's fists impacted with vital spots. Unfortunately, he was dense as hell. Normally, a human would have exploded upon getting punched by Naruto, but this guy was just knocked back, and he packed a massive amount of power as well. His hits were close to Naruto's own in power, and they weren't even powered by chakra. Kakuzu had pulled back his tendrils again. Realizing that long range didn't work too well against Naruto, he had put everything into his physical power, and taken human form again. But with all that packed under his skin, he became incredibly dense, and Naruto was sure that some of the tendrils had become springs inside his arms, coiled and released whenever he threw a punch. So it was no surprise that Naruto's nose was broken as he, panting, stood across from Kakuzu in one of the water-filled craters that had cleared most of the forest Naruto had created. Well, you're resilient, I'll give you that, brat, Kakuzu said, breathing heavily as well. Oh yeah, and he had a metric fuckton of stamina, just like Naruto. A victory through attrition would take way too long. Thanks. Naruto muttered, releasing a steadying breath. Seriously, though, I'd like it if you could just go down already. Kakuzu didn't respond to that. Instead, his legs tensed up, and a nanosecond later he shot toward Naruto like a rocket. The blonde barely dodged the right hook thrown at his face, then leaned back to avoid a follow-up left. He ducked under another right and shot forward, smashing his forehead into Kakuzu's chest and making him stumble back. Then he went on the offensive for the umpteenth time that day. This was impossible, though. Naruto could feel his energy start running out. He was actually starting to run out of chakra, against one opponent, who still stood. Kakuzu seemed to notice Naruto's waning strength as well, judging by the grin on his now unmasked face. He actually had the courage to raise his hand and catch Naruto's fist as it came flying at him. What's the matter, kid? Running out of steam? He asked mockingly, before driving his fist up into Naruto's solar plexus, making the blonde spit up a wad of blood as he cried out in pain. You! Naruto roared in anger and jumped, spinning in the air while Kakuzu was still holding onto his fist and lashing out with a kick to the missing nin's temple, sending him flying and making him let go in the process. It showed how tired Naruto was getting by how his left leg gave out when he landed, and his knee landed on the water. Damn it. These guys don't mess around. It was Naruto's fault, really. He had used Hidan as an average, and had deemed Kakuzu to be slightly above him in power, and so he had just launched jutsu after jutsu, tiring himself out too quickly. It was all well and good to fight Kakashi and win, since he knew the man, knew his skills and tactics, knew how to combat the Sharingan. Fighting an unknown was completely different. Naruto closed his eyes and took a deep breath, but when he opened them again, he found himself standing inside the now very familiar sewer of his mind. Oh, wow, came an amused voice from behind the massive bars, and Naruto could see that Kurama was grinning slightly. It's been a long time since you were pushed like this, Naruto. At this rate, you're going to die, you know. Shut up, Naruto muttered, crossing his arms. I'm just a bit out of breath, that's all. Kurama stared at Naruto in silence for a few seconds, but then walked up to the bars and lowered his head to peer out at Naruto. Normally, I'd just be amused and sort of impressed with your resilience, brat, but in case you hadn't noticed, this man has no qualms about beating the ever-loving crap out of you. And also, you might remember that you sent your teammates away. Stupid move, by the way, but then I'm no longer surprised when you do something stupid. It seems to be a trend. Get to the point, Naruto growled out with a glare. He really wasn't in the mood to trade insults with Kurama right now. My point is, this man is stronger than you, Kurama said, ignoring how Naruto's glare intensified. Alright, maybe that's not true, but you've wasted too much chakra. You got a big head and thought you could beat this guy with brute force like you've always done, but this man is old, and he has more experience in his pinky than you do your entire body. In short, you lost this fight the second you started flinging those high-power jutsu at him. Naruto frowned, but he did see the truth in Kurama's words. He was never going to admit it, and he definitely didn't like it, but it was true nonetheless. And after this man beats you senseless, he will take you back to whatever lair the Akatsuki is hiding in, and he's going to extract me from you. While being separated from you has been my dream for a long time now, there will be no freedom for me, and you will die from the extraction. Neither of us want to experience that outcome. So, it's time for you to stop resisting, Naruto. Naruto blinked at that and looked up at Kurama in surprise. You're not seriously going to suggest. You're a Jinchuriki, you stubborn brat. Kurama barked. Use my power. You have no other choice. Yes, not wanting to rely on my power is admirable and all, but maybe you didn't hear me. If you don't, you will die. Even if I were to agree, I have no idea how to use it, Naruto muttered. He really hated it when Kurama had a point. He couldn't argue with it, and if there was anything Naruto found more annoying than Sasuke lording some great accomplishment over him, it was when Kurama won an argument. Don't worry, brat, that's the good thing about me, Kurama said, a wide grin appearing on his face. My chakra is filled with hatred and anger, and you've most likely noticed many times that when you're angry, you act on instinct. Naruto was still frowning as he stared up at Kurama. Then, he nodded. Alright, let's do this. But if I so much as think that you might be trying to take over. Don't worry, this time is a freebie, no strings attached, Kurama said as the water beneath Naruto's feet started to boil and glow orange. The water seemed to come alive and rose up in tendrils to wrap around Naruto's legs, steadily climbing upward. Naruto gritted his teeth as the chakra started covering him. It felt like his skin was on fire wherever the chakra touched him. He had long since believed his own chakra to be one of the most powerful in the world, but this was bordering on extreme. There was no way the human body could handle all of Kurama's chakra at once, and people had been trying that for decades. But he felt the power bonding to his muscles, he felt himself growing stronger, even through the intense pain he was feeling. It was so intense that for the first time in a very long time, Naruto let loose a roar of pain that echoed in the sewer, accompanied by Kurama's laugh. Now, kid, let's go wild. Back in the real world, Kakuzu was climbing out of the water, having lost his grip on his water walking after that surprisingly jarring kick to the head. He was ready to go another round with the brat, when he suddenly noticed goosebumps appearing on his arm. Which was strange in itself, because he hadn't gotten goosebumps since before he mastered the Jongu and changed his entire body. He didn't even think he could get them anymore. And yet there they were, and when he looked up he noticed why. The boy, Senju Naruto, a ninja he begrudgingly had to respect for his power and resilience, was clenching his fists and gritting his teeth, a continuous growl rumbling in his throat. An orange color was swirling in his eyes, and his pupils shrank and lengthened, turning into a pair of slits as the whisker marks on his cheeks thickened. Was he? Kakuzu's musing was answered when an orange chakra started swirling around the boy, who got to his feet and flexed his fingers, his nails lengthening and turning into claws. Well now. Kakuzu muttered to himself as he narrowed his eyes slightly. That's not good. The leader had been calling for a while now, so perhaps a tactical retreat was. Naruto growled louder, before letting loose an amazingly powerful roar that completely blew the water out of the crater they were standing in, also lifting Kakuzu off his feet and sending him soaring into a small patch of untouched forest. It didn't stay untouched for long, and Kakuzu smashed through tree after tree, before landing on the ground with a crunch. Thank the heavens his body no longer had any bones, or he was sure that many of them would have been broken. No, Kakuzu cried out when Naruto seemed to materialize out of thin air above him, and rammed his knee down into Kakuzu's non-existent spine, another thing he was no grateful that he didn't have. Before Kakuzu even had time to truly register the incredible pain in his back, he felt the boy grab his head, and suddenly he found himself airborne once more. The incredibly old shinobi quickly came to his senses, though, righting himself in midair and lashing out with his arm, which separated mid-forearm and shot off, attached by 3 black, tar-like tendrils. The hand latched onto an unharmed tree and he came to a jerking halt in the air, before the ropes were pulled back into his arm, yanking him toward the tree and landing on a branch on his feet. He was already getting tired, and now that the blonde had tapped into a reserve tank of incredibly powerful chakra, the outcome of this battle wasn't as certain as it had been a few minutes ago. Kakuzu couldn't believe that he had actually forgotten about the Kyuubi. He had to retreat for now. If only for a couple of minutes. He needed a moment to recover. Suddenly, Kakuzu discovered that he wasn't alone on the branch. He looked to his left to find himself staring into those intense orange eyes. Oh, he didn't even see the punch coming. 1 second, the blonde had just stood there glaring impudently at him, and then next second, stars had exploded in front of Kakuzu's eyes, and he once more found himself flying through the air. Maybe this was becoming a tray. Herc. Kakuzu grunted out when the boy flashed into view above him and dropped a heel down on the immortal's midsection, rocketing him down into the ground with considerable force. The old shinobi let out several coughs, both because his throat was filled with dust, and because that blow and the following meeting with the ground had knocked the wind out of him, and slowly opened his eyes to stare up at the silhouette in the sky. The boy's hand was raised, and there was a ball of swirling chakra in his hand as he came falling toward Kakuzu. Then, the ball grew to a size of about 2 feet in diameter, which made Kakuzu frown. Well, crap. Kakashi had been concerned when the ground had stopped shaking, indicating that the fight between Naruto and Kakuzu was most likely over. The concern had come from the fact that he could barely sense Naruto at that point, indicating that his chakra reserves were dangerously low. That concern had quickly turned into alarm, however, when Naruto's chakra signal suddenly intensified, and the area had been bathed in an incredibly powerful and sinister chakra, one that Kakashi knew well, despite not having felt it for over 10 years. Sensei, Sasuke spoke up, frowning. Is this? Yeah, Kakashi said with a nod. For Naruto to use this, he must be in. Kakashi didn't even have time to finish the sentence before Sasuke vanished from view, taking off with incredible speed. He was surprised to see that Hinata quickly overcame the initial fear of the chakra and followed Sasuke almost immediately. 9th Platoon, Kakashi said, looking to Raida and gesturing for Hidan's body. Take this guy back to Konoha. We'll be along shortly. With that, the one-eyed Junin took off as well, not giving Raida the opportunity to argue with being assigned a delivery job. Damn brats, he muttered as he ran, noticing that he wasn't catching up to his students. I must be getting old. Kakashi stumbled slightly when another explosion rocked the area, followed by a deafening silence. Now the fight had to be over. If it wasn't, then Kakashi would be overcome with jealousy over the stamina of the two combatants. If it had been Kakashi fighting Naruto, he probably would have been too worn out to even move by now. And besides, the feel of Kyuubi's chakra had disappeared, so that was a good sign. The Junin came to a complete stop next to his two students at the edge of a newly made clearing, and joined them in staring at the scene in shock. The clearing was about half the size of Konoha itself, with craters covering more than 4/5 of it. To the right, in the largest crater there, which looked big enough to have been hit by a meteor, stood a lone figure, who they quickly recognized as Naruto. There was no sign of Kakuzu, save for some black liquid spattered here and there, along with the occasional piece of torn cloth. Wow! Sasuke uttered in amazement as his gaze drifted over to the blonde in time to see his knees give out. The Uchiha blurred out of view and appeared by Naruto to catch him before his knees even touched the ground. A weak grin spread on the blonde's face as he slowly turned his head to look up at his friend. Yo, Sasuke. I won. Yeah, I noticed that, Sasuke said, grabbing Naruto's arm and slinging it over his shoulders. You know, when you go overboard in style, don't you? Hilarious. Naruto muttered sarcastically. I fucked up in this fight. Doesn't look like it, Sasuke said as he nudged a piece of cloth with his foot. I'd say you did a pretty good job of wiping this guy off the face of the earth. How the hell could you have fucked up? I'm too tired to tell the story now, but I'll let you know later. Naruto said, exhaling slowly. I think I'm going to take a nap now. You do that, Sasuke said. I've got you. In a dark cave in an unknown location, a massive statue stood with its hands raised. 6 of its fingers were occupied by 6 humanoid projections, all of them wearing long, high-collared coats. One of them, who looked like he had a Venus flytrap covering his body, spoke up. Kakuzu is dead, he spoke in a pleasant, polite tone of voice. Then, his voice switched to a darker, no-nonsense tone. And Hidan has been captured. His gaze drifted down to the motionless woman laying at the base of the statue. They won't be joining us for the Nibi ceiling. The Kyuubi brat and his team again, was it? The tallest of the projections, a man easily recognizable as Hoshigaki Kisame, said with an amused chuckle. My, they're just picking us off one after the other, aren't they? You admire them, Kisame? Uchiha Itachi asked, glancing at Kisame, who gave another chuckle. The boy in particular, the swordsman said. When he was just a brat he managed to block a swing from Samahata. And now as a young adult, he's been responsible for taking out at least 2 of us. Of course I admire him. I'll still cleave his legs off when I meet him, but there's nothing wrong with a bit of respect between warriors. What is the plan now? Itachi asked as his gaze drifted toward the leader of the group, a man whose silhouette showed spiky hair much like Naruto's. His eyes had no irises, and the pupils had 3 circles around them. The man's eyes closed in thought for a moment. The boy is becoming a problem. So, do we go after him again? Kisame asked, his tone suggesting that he was grinning. No. Kisame, Itachi, continue your search for the Yonbi. I shall go to Konoha and collect the Kyuubi. 3 days later, one could find a visibly annoyed Senju Naruto sitting in a bed in Konoha's hospital. With him in the room were Sasuke and Hinata. While Hinata was standing by the window, watching the birds fluttering by, Naruto and Sasuke were amusing themselves with some janken. They were into their 57th round. Yay! Naruto muttered in a dull tone as he held up a rock to Sasuke's scissors. Oh no. Sasuke said, sounding equally bored in his monotone voice. Please cheer up, you two, Hinata said softly. It's a beautiful day, after all. And this isn't the first time we've had to wait. Usually, I don't mind waiting for Kakashi-sensei, Naruto said. Sometimes it's even kinda nice to have a bit of peace before a dull mission, but seriously, waiting for him in a hospital. That's kinda bordering on unbearable. For once, I'm in full agreement, Sasuke said with a frown. And it's worse for me, because I'm not even a patient. Hey, I'm not a patient, either. Naruto argued. I was fully healed by yesterday morning. It's just these demon doctors who insist on keeping me here for observation. Multiple fractures in both arms, in both legs, 4 ribs broken, 3 cracked, a ruptured spleen, a broken nose, and a concussion, yet fully healed in 2 days. Sasuke muttered, his bored look vanishing in order to give Naruto an annoyed frown. My jealousy has never been this strong. He says that, but he isn't fully healed yet, Hinata said softly, giving Sasuke a placating smile. His bones are still a bit fragile, and there may be some lingering nerve damage. The tingle in my toes has nothing to do with nerve damage, Naruto argued. I'm just sick and tired of this freaking hospital bed. Hard and lumpy though it may be, I prefer my own bed over this any day. Sasuke opened his mouth to speak, but the door slid open at that moment, revealing their lazy Junin commander, who looked chipper as always. Hey, guys. I got lost, he said happily and without shame, as usual. He was treated to a pair of glares and a disapproving look. You could at least be a bit creative with your excuse, Sasuke scolded. We're not gonna buy it, but it provides some amusement, at least. Kakashi just gave a shrug, showing how little he cared about his student's opinion. Well, Naruto, you'll be pleased to know that the hospital will be discharging you today, the Junin said as he walked up to Naruto's bed and reached into his kunai pouch, taking out a folded piece of paper. And I got you something that I thought you might like. Kakashi held out the paper to Naruto, who took it with a curious look on his face. What's this? Naruto asked, unfolding the paper and reading it. A permission slip. The Godime has granted you permission to read the Forbidden Scroll, Kakashi said, which made his students go wide-eyed. The Forbidden Scroll? Hinata asked in amazement. But, it's forbidden for a reason. Well, it's more like a supervised peek, but even that is an honor, Kakashi said. Many of the jutsu in that scroll are forbidden because they are dangerous, but some are forbidden only because of the dangers that come with using them, such as the incredible chakra consumption of the Kage Bunshin. Tsunade-sama will be with you when you read it, and will decide which jutsu you are allowed to learn. Is that alright? Sasuke asked as he jutted his thumb over his shoulder in Naruto's direction. Entrusting the jutsu in that scroll to this guy. Naruto showed that moment to show just how much he had healed by shooting up in his bed and slamming his forehead into Sasuke's in a vicious headbutt, which knocked the Uchiha to the floor. Hey, you dick, most of those jutsu were created by the Shodai and Nadaime. It's practically my birthright. Kakashi chuckled at the familiar antics of his students, and Hinata giggled as Sasuke shot to his feet and slammed his forehead into Naruto's to engage in a furious glaring match. You dare. Sasuke growled out in that energetic voice that only seemed to come out when he argued with Naruto. Well, Kakashi said, coughing to grab their attention, Tsunade-sama claims that you'll get to read the scroll, but I'm getting the feeling that there is only one jutsu that she wishes for you to learn. This caused Naruto and Sasuke to break their glaring to focus on Kakashi. What jutsu? Naruto asked. There is a jutsu in the Forbidden Scroll that was created by the Nadaime Hokage, and later adopted by the Yondaime, Kakashi explained, a smile visible behind his mask as he gave Naruto a look that seemed somewhat excited. No doubt, that very jutsu was the reason why Jiraiya-sama focused so much on teaching you Fuinjutsu. Sasuke's eyes widened at that. You mean? That's right, Kakashi said, nodding. The Hiraishin no Jutsu, Flying Thunder God technique. A tense silence followed this statement. It was understandable. After all, Kakashi had told them all how difficult the Yondaime had claimed that learning that jutsu was. And while Naruto was amazing at learning jutsu, he was far from the genius that the Yondaime was. Then again, Kakashi thought, glancing at Naruto and seeing the shock melt away to make room for excitement, I suppose there are many kinds of genius. This kid will probably surprise me yet again. The Hiraishin. Naruto muttered, looking down to stare at his lap. The jutsu that earned my father the name, Yellow Flash. He looked up suddenly, a grin on his face. Sounds like fun. Which means that if he learns this, Hinata mumbled from her place by the window, Naruto-kun will be even faster than Sasuke-kun. Sasuke twitched and whipped his head toward Hinata. We agreed after the Haku fight that space-time jutsu don't count. Right. Anyway, Kakashi said, clapping his hands together to get attention once more, before Naruto and Sasuke slipped into another long-winded argument. Naruto still needs a bit of rest, and I have to talk to him in private. Sasuke, Hinata, you have today and tomorrow off still. Since the doctors have cleared you, you might want to get a bit of training in before Team 7 goes back to active duty. What do you need to talk to him about? Sasuke asked, which got him a frown from Kakashi. If I wanted to tell you, I wouldn't ask to talk to him in private, would I? Sasuke grumbled at that. Fine. Didn't really care. Anyway, he muttered, nodding to Hinata and gesturing for the door. We'll leave you two alone, then. I can't come. Naruto asked in a somewhat pleading tone of voice. I'd really like to get out of here. Sorry, you're going to have to wait for a little while longer, Kakashi said with a smile as his two other students left the room, closing the door behind them. Kakashi moved over to the door and leaned against it, sharpening his senses. You'll excuse me if I don't start talking right away. Yeah, they're still outside, Naruto said with a nod. Immediately, something, most likely Sasuke's fist, slammed into the door, followed by the sound of footsteps hurrying away, which made both Naruto and Kakashi smile. The smile disappeared from Kakashi's face, however, to be replaced by a serious look as the man put his hands in his pockets. He was quiet for a moment, not because he thought Sasuke and Hinata were still outside, but rather so that he could give Naruto a once-over. How are your muscles holding up? He asked seriously, getting a shocked look from Naruto. The burning is still there, right? How did? In her time as a Jinchuriki, Kushina used the Kyuubi's chakra twice, and she reported that it was so potent that it felt as though her body was on fire. The reports stated that the pain lingered for weeks. Jiraiya-sama says that your seal was designed to let its chakra mingle with your own, so the effects might be lessened, but this was the first time you've used it, right? Naruto frowned. Yeah, it's potent, alright, he said, raising his hand and clenching his fist. I was at my limits, but the chakra easily doubled my power. But you're right, it was damaging. It's not even something I can rely on as a last resort. Because. Naruto muttered. If I use that chakra, I burn out immediately. When I stopped using it back then, I could barely move, and it wasn't because I was exhausted. It felt like my blood had been replaced with acid. What if I encounter an unexpected enemy after using it? Kakashi nodded at that. But then, the effects could be temporary, he reasoned. Perhaps your body will adjust if you use it enough times. That made Naruto frown again. There was a hint of anger in his eyes as he looked up at Kakashi. His fists were clenched, and Kakashi understood why. While Naruto had never displayed any real animosity toward the Kyuubi, he hated the thought of relying on its power, of acting like a Jinchuriki. Are you telling me to use it in battle from now on? Not at all, I know you're opposed to it, Kakashi said, raising his hands in a placating manner. I'm just suggesting that you use it in a controlled environment, such as during training, both to master it, and to let your body adapt. A snort was the reply he got. You don't think it's a good idea? Kakashi asked in surprise. Naruto had never really backed down from training, even when he didn't like it. Oh, I think it's a better idea than only using it as a last resort, Naruto said, turning his head to look toward the window. I was just wondering if the populace of Konoha would be okay if the village was suddenly bathed in Kurama's chakra again after so many years. Kakashi had to nod in realization at that. The villagers wouldn't be too pleased, that was for sure. It might even cause a panic. I'm sure we can find a suitable place for you to train, Kakashi mumbled, raising his hand and rubbing his chin. I'll talk to Tsunade-sama about it. She might know a good spot. I don't like it. But, well, I guess it's for the best, Naruto said, crossing his arms. Besides, I think Kurama might feel a bit better if he's allowed to stretch his proverbial legs a bit. Kakashi's eye widened in surprise, as though he hadn't even taken the fact that Kurama was a sentient creature into consideration. I guess that's true. Naruto stretched slowly as he wandered through the streets of Konoha. Walking next to him was Ino, who had found him just a few minutes after he was discharged from the hospital. After a bit of small talk, Naruto had agreed to take her out on another day. That hospital, they must have hidden something in the mattress, Naruto muttered, getting a few kinks out of his neck. I'm always so stiff when I get out of there. Well, the hospital is better than the alternative, Ino reasoned, giving Naruto a worried look. By the way, are you sure you should be out and about? You looked really bad after that last mission. I heal fast, don't worry about it, Naruto said with a shrug. Anyway, what do you wanna do? Ino glanced around for a moment, and then shrugged, giving Naruto a small smile. My schedule's clear all day. Why don't we just walk around a bit and see if we find something interesting? Yeah, that works. I need to move my legs a bit, anyway, Naruto said, nodding in agreement. After a few moments of silence, however, he glanced at his date. Hey, Ino, why did you want to date me? Ino uttered, blinking up at her fellow blonde. What do you mean? I mean, are you dating me only because Sasuke is off the market? You did have a massive crush on him. Ino laughed at that and waved him off. You've been gone for a long time, Naruto. We all have to grow up sometime. I was crushing on Sasuke because he was the Uchiha prodigy, and he was very good looking to boot, whereas you were loud and sort of obnoxious. Naruto coughed at that. He couldn't really deny how he had acted back at the academy, but he couldn't help but mutter, look at the pot calling the kettle black. Okay, so I was kind of loud as well, Ino conceded. But like I said, we have to grow up sometime, and I have, and so have you. You're a pretty reliable guy, and with the baby fat gone, you've gone from cute to hot. Not to mention that you're a very strong ninja. How can I not want to date you? Naruto uttered, giving Ino a somewhat unconvinced look, which made her laugh. Okay, so if Sasuke was straight, I'd probably still be crushing on him, but he's not, and I'm happy about that. Him batting for the other team just let me sit down and think about what I was really looking for in a guy. And to be honest, having spent all these years with Shikamaru and Choji, I can't live without a bit of noise, and Sasuke isn't exactly famous for being loud and spontaneous. So what you're saying is, you've grown. Yes, Ino said with a nod. Sasuke may be an academy girl's dream guy, but that's all. Guys like him usually aren't good boyfriend material for girls like me. She laughed. And speaking of growing, I've even stopped going on those insane diets. Oh really? Naruto asked in amazement. He gave Ino a once-over, noting that she still had an incredible figure. Doesn't look like it. Well, I had a run-in with Guy-sensei one day, Ino explained. He started chastising me, telling me how a ninja can't function at 100% without proper nourishment, and that if I wanted to work off my meals, I could just train hard. Back in the day, training wasn't exactly top priority, but you know, I've taken to it pretty well. It just goes to show that he was right. I'm eating properly, and I can even gorge myself on sweets every once in a while, and just look at me. Ino took a step away from Naruto and did a little twirl, before striking a somewhat provocative pose, which Naruto had to admit sent a bit of a tingle down his spine. I've maintained my figure despite that, all thanks to training. She gave a small laugh and stepped over to Naruto again, looping her arm around his. And on that subject, there's a place over there that sells these really delicious daifuku, she said, pointing down the street. Treat me. Thanks for listening. I hope you guys liked it. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like for more what ifs and support the author. See you guys in the next video.